Hi, my name is Jeff Castelaz and I'm the president of Danger Bird Records and Cast Management. We're sitting here on the rooftop deck of our offices, which might look glamorous, but it's really cold out here and we never come out here. I've been a manager since I was 18 years old. Sort of like many of us in the business, I had no choice but to follow the straight path that I was on, that was a search for how to get myself involved in the music business and how to stay close to the heat, if you will, while being terrified of being an artist myself. I actually am a musician, but I've never really done anything with that. And I got the music bug at a very, very early age when I was 7 or 8 years old, maybe even younger, listening to my brother's Beatles records. You know, the Beatles song Love Me Do, I have a very clear memory of being 3 or 4 years old and just getting hit by that song, that bittersweet melody in that song, being slightly terrified of it, but never forgetting it. And then listening to Neil Diamond with my mom, and I was in it. And to flash forward to when I was 18, I was on the concert committee at my university, at Marquette University in Milwaukee. And we were promoting shows with people like Matthew Sweet, the Lemonheads, Smashing Pumpkins before their first album came out, Deke Kreutzen, who were a great hardcore speed metal band from Milwaukee, who were an early client of Butch Vig's, and then this band that no one ever heard of called Pearl Jam. And we promoted Pearl Jam the week before they played at Saturday Night Live for the first time. And I remember having a clear memory of getting the envelope in the mail from Epic Records and getting one CD, one bio, and one photo to promote this show in a 1,000-seat theater in a city of 1 million people, and thinking, wait, this isn't enough material to promote this entire concert and to really do the job that we're supposed to do as a concert promoter for this band. And I bet that the manager of the band could fix this problem. And from that point on, I remember wanting to be a manager and wanting to be the person who created the plan so that one CD, one photo, and one bio didn't get sent out to a promoter in a city of 1 million people. So that maybe they'd get a case of materials to really do the job for the band. And that is very clear to me that that was the moment that I wanted to be a manager and actually become part of the process. For me, I think many of the managers that I know, John Silva, Jim Garno, you know, some of the bigger guys, everyone has a path. Maybe a guy was a musician himself. Maybe a guy was a road manager and parlayed that into managing a band, and then stopped road managing and just became a manager and started managing 4 bands, 5 bands, 10 bands. My thing is that I was never a road manager and I never was a professional musician. I was a journalist, both a music journalist from the time I was 18 and an investigative journalist, which means I was writing record reviews for Ray Gun magazine. Remember them? I wrote for the first 2 years of Ray Gun, getting paid $25 per record review, waiting 6 months to get paid, and you know, all that great stuff. I was also the music editor of a weekly paper in Milwaukee. Literally when I was 18 years old. I did that from 18 to 22 years old. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew I could write, and I knew a number of people who could write and a number of photographers, and we put together 4 pages a week of previews, reviews, interviews. And from that vantage point, I met a musician of a band that I actually was very critical of in my writing, who thought I was a pretty enterprising guy and asked me if I would manage his band. This band, they were called Wild Kingdom, and they were a funk punk ska band like Fishbone or Bad Brains or something out of Milwaukee. And I went and met with the band, and I thought, again, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but I think I can do this. And as a music journalist and a college radio DJ at WMSE in Milwaukee, I was kind of nearing the end of my interest in being a DJ and a music journalist, and thinking, again, if I could get closer to the heat, that could be more interesting. Money didn't even come into it for me. I mean, I was making more money writing than I was managing that band in the early days. Money didn't even occur to me. It was just about, I want to be closer to the heat. I want to be somebody who is part of the creative process, not someone who's writing about it. And so I just kept following this path and stumbling into having more fun at doing what I was passionate about. You know, money is, you know, there's an old saying, money is what you need to buy things that you can't create yourself, right? You need to pay your mortgage, you need to pay for your gas in your car and your electric bill and your kids' tuition and all that stuff. And I think with success and with doing ethical business, which is something I'm very, very into, I think money is the byproduct of doing that. That's a very interesting question. I know some people who would honestly answer that money is the most important thing to them. I think money is an important thing to me, but again, it's a byproduct of doing what I love doing. And that's a truthful statement for me. I can absolutely tell you that I wake up every morning, even on a bad day, even on a tough day when I've got 15 black clouds hanging over my business that I have to deal with. It's that very youthful, very curious passion or heat. I still listen to that Beatles song on my, thank God for iTunes. I can still listen to Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers and still wonder, like, how in the hell did these guys do this? I was just listening when you came over to a live recording of them, and it's like perfect. And it's that quest for figuring out how to do this. Interestingly enough, I've never had a platinum record. I've never even had a gold record as a manager. As a producer manager, I have. And so that's part of the carrot on the end of the stick that I'm constantly chasing for. Plenty of my friends have had multi-platinum records. And I'm still chasing that ring, if you will. Again, it's not about the money. It's about, like, wow, what would it be like if? What will it be like when?
How do you find artists?
Well, artists are crazy, and artists need our help. I think artists are crazy, and I say that in a very respectful way. I always tell people, if you knew, Mr. Artist, how to do X, Y, and Z, and you could be responsible enough and care enough about returning phone calls and emails and strategizing your career, you wouldn't need me. Especially now in the days of email and websites and FTP downloads and all that. The management game and the artist game has changed. First of all, labels, A&R people, business managers, everybody has more direct access to the clients, to the artists. It's no longer like the manager is just the hub of communication and there's a secret veil in between everybody and the artist. It's very open now. I love that craziness that comes along with artists. I love and I like to think that I'm good at choosing artists and working with artists over a long period of time to help them with their vision. I think that the manager's job is very simple. And I remember this every day because I know what my job isn't. My job isn't to be their friends. If you become friendly with the client, that's great. Again, that's a byproduct. My job is to help my clients meet their goals, to find out what are their needs and wants and to help them meet their goals. Simple as that. If you have a client who says, I want to make $1 million and I don't want to sign to a major label, but I'm willing to put my songs in Prel commercials, that's fine. Then don't waste your time trying to sign your band to Epic Records. Try and get them in their music into commercials and try and get them to sell t-shirts and to sell concert tickets.
How do you locate artists to represent?
I've like many managers, if there's 100 ways to meet an artist and get in a room with an artist and find that person, I've probably hit every 100 of those ways. Sometimes it's as boring as a lawyer calling you. I manage a band called The Vacation, where I got a call from their lawyer, who was someone I was friendly with, and one of the other partners at his firm represented me. And I ran into his assistant when I was in their office. A couple weeks later, he called me and he said, your name came up today as a hungry young manager. I've got this great band. They were then called The Sons, as you may recall. And he said, I've got this band. Their demo's incredible. They're incredible live, but I'm not sure if they're one step from stardom or one step from nothing. Could I send you the CD? I got the CD. By the time the first chorus of the first song hit, I called him and said, you're crazy if you think this band isn't the most amazing thing ever. They happened to be playing that night, and the rest is history. Rick Rubin signed them after about 2.5 years of us working on an independent label level and just putting one foot in front of the other, doing all the things you're supposed to do. And now, one of the biggest producers in the history of rock and roll signed them to his label. It's re-releasing the album that we already made. And that's a very boring example of how I signed a very exciting band. Sometimes you find it through a friend of a friend. Sometimes you find it through a band that may have turned you down for representation, but you had a good connection with, and they liked you, but they signed with another manager for other reasons. And they might stay in touch with you, and they might say, hey, these young guys we met on tour, they need a manager. Would you be interested in checking them out? Man, it happens every possible way. Sometimes other managers recommend you to people that they love and can't take on. Or they might think that you're really good at doing something. I've managed a couple of artists from France who have very, very nice careers in America but need an American manager to look after their career here and to help build what they're doing. So I've kind of gotten into that swing of things. It's pretty simple, and I try and educate my clients, and I'm going to sound really nerdy by saying this. I try and get my clients to read about business, at least to tell them about this book that everyone loves, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which is a great, simple thing for people to read. And it's like, really the way it is that the band are the board of directors, or the band are the co-CEOs of their corporation. The manager is the president. And then all the people, the lawyer, the publicist, the record label, the road manager, the accountant, are the division heads. And you have to ask your clients, what do you want out of your business? If you want to just play in a basement and have your friends like you, that's great. You don't need a manager, you don't need an agent, you can just do that. If you want to foist yourself upon the world, there are a number of different levels of record labels that can help you. Record labels are just marketing companies. And everybody gets very emotional about it, and they should, because it's a big thing. But really, record companies are just marketing companies, right? They get the rights to your product, and they spend X amount of money to market your record, and they make a markup on it, or a profit, and they pay you what ends up being a very small royalty rate for the trouble. And a band like The Vacation needed to be on their own, paving their way on the street in LA. And then they needed to get in the studio with a producer who could help them take the vision of their own band and make it a recorded reality. And they needed to do it without a label, because they needed to not have people pushing them around and trying to mold them and turn them into, I don't remember what the hot band of the moment was, but all the bands now are supposed to sound like the Killers and the Bravery and God knows what else, right? Back then it was probably the Strokes. They needed to make their music in the purest way possible, like Green Day, like Werent, like The Offspring. Very simple. Get it on record, and people will then come to it. They knew they didn't want to be on a major then, but they knew they wanted to get to be on a major. I try to tell my clients why they want to be on a major, why they want to be on an independent, why they may want to, in fact, develop their music in a recorded form completely offline before they even get to a label. It's about decisions, and it's about educating your clients about what the options are. Everybody wants to be on Warner Brothers Records or Interscope or Universal or whatever, right? Because it's glamorous, it's sexy, there's the promise of big money and hot chicks and fancy houses. Of course, we all know that that's not a reality. There's a lot of work to be paid, and by the time the money ends up in the artist's hands, it's usually a much more meager sum than it was when it was on the contract being negotiated by the lawyer. I try to empower my clients with knowledge so that they stay in a powerful position in their own careers, and so they don't feel like they're under the thumb of the man. I don't know about not signing with a label, because then as a manager you take on too much responsibility. That it's interesting, because I'm a manager who owns a label, but I try to not manage artists on my label, and I try to make sure that people are hired to do the job that they specialize in. For instance, I don't try and get people publicity. I try and direct my publicists to get publicity for my artists. Because when you cross those boundaries, you open yourself up to getting a foot in your ass from your clients. And B, you open yourself up to handling things the wrong way. You know, I don't expect my publicists to put together a tour budget. I don't expect my publicists to go and sit down with the band and talk to them about their overall strategy for 2 years for their career. I expect myself to do that. So I try and have very simple boundaries with my team for an artist, and I like to have them do their job. That said, a band like The Vacation had a publicist from day one, and it worked. We got in the LA Weekly, the LA Times, Guitar World, Spin, Rolling Stone, the NME, and so forth and so on, because I gave a person a job and paid him a very little a very small sum, which is what we could afford at that time, and he did a great job. It wasn't my job to do that. I think that just thinking that every band needs to be on a major label is a misnomer. It's a really, really bad thing to think. First of all, bands get swallowed up on major labels, and second of all, that's fool's gold. If you waste 3 years of a band's life trying to sign to a major label and you don't put out any music into the world, what service are you doing for them? I believe bands need to put out music as soon as possible and grow in public. Our mission statement for the label is very similar to my mission statement for my management company, which is, in a simple form, to help our in this case, our clients, our bands on the label, to meet their goals and to do ethical business, which is an interesting thing because as a label, you're paying people to work for you. And one of the things that I realized as a manager who was encouraging labels to hire independent marketing companies and publicists and radio indies and so forth was that all these people, they may have loved my bands, but they were waiting 3, 4, 5, 6 months to get paid. And they were always being pressured to cut their rates and come in and do things cheaper, right? So one of the things that my partner and I at Dangerbird decided was that we would pay people quickly. We would ask them to give us an indie rate because we're an indie. We can't afford the same amount of money that Warner can, theoretically. But we could pay them quickly. And we figured that that would actually really help us because it would create a feeling of goodwill and camaraderie and teamwork. And lo and behold, it's actually working. And we're signing great bands who are making great music, all of whom feel like they're part of a team and part of a family at Dangerbird. And therefore, when they go out there to play shows and do interviews and do radio performances and so on, they're actually excited about what they're doing. They're not sort of like encumbered by this weird negative vibe and why are we doing this and we don't like working at all this, because it's a crappy job getting up at 6 in the morning and playing at midnight. And we've actually been able to see our mission statement through, at least for the first 2 years. We haven't had much of an opportunity to violate our mission statement yet, and I hope we won't, you know? We have an interesting situation. We have private financing that we don't talk about. But again, the one thing I will say about our financing is that we sort of accidentally stumbled into wanting to start a label. It's a crazy idea, right? It costs a lot of money. It's an incredibly risky proposition. You have to sell yourself like a madman in the front end to lawyers, to managers, to the bands themselves, to producers, to mixers, to studio owners, to the distribution company people when you're pitching your label for distribution. And you have to really put yourself on the line and sell yourself in a way that is, frankly, very uncomfortable. But we decided that we needed to create a solution to what I call the major label problem. And it's an interesting thing for me to say as a manager who manages bands on major labels. But the major label challenge, I'll say in a more appropriate way, is that major labels are big, monstrous machines. And most people who work for major labels will admit this. They move very quickly when they have a huge hit on their hands. But to get a band from 0 records to 20,000 records is maybe something they aren't great at these days. And most label executives that I know would admit that. Most major labels are looking to sign bands that are already on an indie where they can pay them a premium price or pay the label a premium price to get them. Death Cab for Cutie being signed to Atlantic off of Barsuk is a great example. Green Day being signed off of Lookout Records is a great example. I don't know if they were on Lookout or if they just had a one-off deal, but they put out a record and I believe an EP on Lookout, a tiny little indie, and then they became attractive to Warner Records. And they were in existence, I like to say. They weren't just a band with a demo. We are looking to build Dangerbird Records as a full label. We are not looking to build a band and then sell them off to a major. I'm not saying we're against that. I'm saying that we're looking to build Dangerbird to be like Epitaph Records, like Jade Tree Records, like Barsuk, like Rough Trade and Heavenly in England. We don't want to be a glorified production company that has a distribution deal. This all came from me shopping a record for one of my clients and finding people saying, God, this is a really great record. We had a completed record, which 2 years ago in America was kind of a weird thing to be shopping. The major label business in America 2 years ago was still in this mode of send me your demos, please, and then I'll sign you, and then I'll make you into the creation that I see fit. Two years on, today, major labels are signing readily produced things with artwork done, websites done, with an agent, with a lawyer, a lot more, because they're realizing that they don't want to pay the upfront money. This is more the way Miramax Pictures and other movie companies have done things for the past 10, 15 years. They do receipts deals. They say, okay, great, I like your product. How much did it cost you to make it? Show me your accounting. I'll pay you $750,000 for your actual receipts, plus another $500,000 as a premium to thank you for doing all the work, and we'll get it out in 4 months. And we find that that at Danger Bird we could be in that position with our artists, or we could be in the position that Miramax has gotten into, where they actually decided to take the success they have with those kinds of deals and actually start making their own pictures and take them straight to market on their own. We have a deal with ADA Distribution, which is the independent distribution arm of Warner Music Group, who are, in my opinion, the best distribution company in America. They have a very human feel. They, like the people in the Warner Music Group on the record side, they are music guys. They really love music. They love marketing their labels, whether it's Epitaph or Sub Pop or Barsook or Matador. They turn up at our shows. They're really invested emotionally in what we're doing. And they've really made it possible for us to go from a label that no one ever heard of to a label that I think a lot of people are talking about now within 2 years. And they make it so that we can cover a lot of ground very quickly. The path for us to go from a couple of guys who had a cool idea and a cool label name and a business plan and financing to getting a distribution deal was actually surprisingly short, and I never ever take this for granted, but because I'm a manager, I am friends with all kinds of people in the music business, and one of the people I'm friends with is the head of sales at Warner Brothers Records, and I just called him up and told him what we were doing and asked if he could help. He put me together with the head of ADA, a guy called Andy Allen, and he basically, in one email, got me in the room so that I could give my pitch to Andy Allen. I actually did it over the phone. I emailed him our written business plan and our pitch. I sent him a PDF. We did a conference call. We did another conference call. He was very hardcore. I thought that Andy did not like our idea. I thought that he was going to walk away, and I thought he was just doing my friend Dave Stein a favor by taking the meeting with me. And what ended up happening is that Andy put me through the ringer. He crunched our numbers. He vetted us 4 different ways. And every time I thought we were at the end of the vetting process, he asked me to give him the numbers in a different way. He asked me all the tough questions. He told me, listen, you know, most people end up with the greatest ideas and end up crying at the end of the day because they're just bleeding money and they can't get ahead of themselves. So he said to me, I want to talk you out of this. Eventually, he said, I'll talk to you on Monday and let's figure this out. And I thought, for sure, this guy is going to kick me to the curb. Lo and behold, he said, let's do it. You've passed the test. And so we got a production and distribution deal with ADA, which, again, was my fantasy. They were the only distribution company we talked to. I figured, you know, if this doesn't work out, I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board and talk to other people. And Andy told me, like, look, I value the idea that you're a manager and that you manage producers and that you understand how to make records and that you understand how to get bands. And I'm going to bet on you and see how this works out. And I met with him in February of this year to go through sort of our 2006 of releases, and he told me that we were one of the labels that they were looking at graduating from their, he didn't use these terms, but I'll say from their C list to their C+ list or their B list. He's looking at building Danger Bird on a long-term level because he sees that we're doing good business. We haven't even sold that many records yet. but he's seeing the kind of business that we're doing, the kind of people that we're bringing on board to help market our records and sell our records, and he likes it.
Are you looking at digital distribution too?
Yeah, we love digital distribution. ADA happens to have 4 or 5 people in the digital distribution, marketing, and sales area. They have more people than any independent distributor out there. They have somebody that they're just hiring here in LA to work out of their office at the Warner Music Group headquarters in Burbank, and they have 3 or 4 people in New York, and they've been great for us. They do all of our digital propagation, so we had the choice to go with them for all of that or to go to an outside firm, and I decided these guys are taking a risk on us up front to do a P&D deal with us. Why don't we do everything with them and give them a piece of the financial cut, and also keep it all under one roof so that all the good stuff we're doing digitally, they can see it, and they can see that Danger Bird has sales along many different lines, not just physical. The kinds of deals that we do, contractually speaking, are the same kinds of deals that major labels do with artists. We use what I would consider to be a simple contract form. I think everybody's doing simple contract forms now because it costs too much money to do complicated contracts. But we do a standard royalty contract form. We have not yet done a 50-50 split. We believe that we should pay our artists fairly. We pay mechanicals to our artists, which is something many major indie labels do not do. We pay our mechanicals every 6 months to all of our artists, whether they've sold 2 records or 20,000 records, because that's, first of all, it's the law. It's set by Congress and you're supposed to pay it. The second thing is we want our artists to be making money, because if you don't pay your artists, you create a very, very uncool situation with them. We don't believe in doing hippy-dippy deals or trying to run our label like a vegan bakery or like some sort of a socialist co-op, because the fact of the matter is we're spending real money to make real records, to market our artists in a way that is competitive with the way major labels market their artists. As a result, we can't cut our artists in on any sort of a greater scheme than what the major labels do. At some point, if an artist comes to us who's sold 100,000 records and they want to have a cooperative kind of a deal with us and put some of their money on the line or somehow change the thinking, we're absolutely open to that. The name of the game for us is being flexible and being cooperative and smart. We believe when we're negotiating a deal with an artist that negotiating is not a dominance-oriented function. Negotiating is when we exchange our realities with the other party in trying to create a legal bond with them. I think that the days of trying to dominate people and kick them in the teeth while you're trying to get married to them, I think are over for guys like me. Maybe if you're someone who's had 8 platinum records or you're a lawyer who's extremely, quote-unquote powerful, you can do that. But I think most of us are trying to create a situation where we're making a living, and we're making a living that is sustainable. And so kicking people in the teeth and treating people like shit and acting crazy, it just can't happen anymore. We feel that doing honest work and ethical work is what is going to help us to have a future. Because as an indie label or as a manager at a boutique management company, one of the greatest things that I could have is to do ethical business and to have people saying good things about us, or at the very least not saying bad things about us. What a novel concept. And some of my favorite managers out there, John Silva to name one of them, is a guy who people love. You know, he's managed Sonic Youth. Sonic Youth brought him Nirvana. Sonic Youth brought him a number of other bands over the past 20 plus years that he's managed them. And he's had a legacy. He's managed some of the biggest bands in the history of rock and roll. Beck, Nirvana, Sonic Youth, Jimmy Eat World, AFI, Tenacious D. And it's because he has a good reputation. And he has a good reputation not because he's running around asking people to say good things about him. It's because he's doing the work and he's not creating ill will wherever he goes. He's creating goodwill wherever he goes. That to me is an inspiration. Yes, I'm optimistic about the music business. And I have very specific thoughts about that. I think that a lot of people outside the music business who pay attention to the press are scared because the press is very, very, very fear-based and very doomsday. I think a lot of people in the music business feel like the end is near or there's a black cloud hanging over them. And I think there's a couple reasons why. I think first of all, if you work for a large corporation that is in a business that is changing or correcting itself, and you're seeing lots and lots and lots of your colleagues getting laid off or unceremoniously kicked out the back door, that would scare the hell out of me. That's why I'm an independent business owner. Not everybody can be an independent business owner, I understand that. But to use the rich dad, poor dad example, if you're part of somebody else's liability pie, in other words, if you're an employee of someone else's corporation, then you're expendable. And if they need to crunch their numbers, they're going to get rid of you. I think that the music business was being run like a party for a long time. And I think what's ended up happening is that as the numbers... Let me start at the beginning. We all know that CDs created a second generation of pink cloud for the major label music business. We all know that the major label music executives and the owners of those corporations got really, really, really drunk on the profits from CDs. They were paying the artists the same royalties that they were paying them for vinyl. They were charging the consumer basically double in the early days of CDs that people were paying for vinyl and cassettes. When that pink cloud burned off and when everything else went away and CDs became the standard, and then the digital problem happened, and then at the same time the major corporations who own the music companies started wanting to sell them off and reap the profits that they could get out of them, of course everybody had to start running the music business like a business. I got in at the very tail end of the major label business. I did my first deal with Warner in 1998. And it was the tail end of when you could sit across the table from the president of Warner Brothers and negotiate a $3 million deal on a pad of paper. And it was pretty much that simple. These days, there are guys counting the beans before they even send the fax to you. They're probably working in the profit and loss on the fax that they're sending you for the offer. I think that the music business was run like a party for a long time. And I bet that all those guys had a great time while it lasted. I think that right now, I'm having more fun managing bands on major labels. It's a little bit more frustrating because you have to jump through more hoops and get more approvals. But ultimately, it creates a higher level of responsibility for the label, and therefore they're making better decisions, good and tough. I think that on the whole, if you read the press about any industry, about anything, you're going to be having a pretty bad day. I think that the bottom line is kids and even some older people are still very excited about music. I think there's 100 bands every day that prove that. Bands that come out of nowhere like Hawthorne Heights. Bands like Jimmy Eat World, who got dropped from Capitol, made a record on their own, and then ended up selling 3 million copies of that record that they made on their own by doing a deal with DreamWorks and coming back to the game and having, 3 or 4 huge radio singles worldwide on that record. I think that there's a reason to be hopeful every day about the music business. And I certainly wouldn't be in this business if I felt like there was no future in it. I think that the major label guys like Doug Morris and Jimmy Iovine and Tom Whalley, yeah, they probably have some real frustrations on their hands and some really challenging things on their hands because they're running giant corporations. And they're being affected by much different factors than those of us who own independent labels like little old Danger Bird or little old Jade Tree Records or even the bigger indies like Matador and Epitaph. But I think that our worries and our concerns are much different than those of the big majors. Those guys are chasing market share. Those guys are chasing bonuses. More power to them. Those guys are figuring out how many private jet flights can their executives afford? How much can we afford to spend taking Pharrell from the Neptunes out to dinner? That's a whole different reality than what most of us are doing. So the advice I would give to someone who's doing either management or owning a label, advice. I can just tell you what works for me. What works for me is getting up early and doing honest, straightforward work, being respectful to other people, and chasing my passions, which for me has always been tied to music. If you want a band on your label really badly, then make it a huge priority and get them. If you want to connect one of your management clients with the world, then just figure out a way to take them one step at a time to meet that goal. I get up really early, partly because I have kids and partly because I always have, and I have a life, and I leave my office at 6 o'clock every day. I see more people having miserable lives in this business by thinking that they have to work until midnight every night and then wondering why they're not happy anymore. And I think if you're not happy with what you're doing, no matter what that means for you, you're going to get burned out and you're going to start kicking people's asses unnecessarily. And I think that prioritizing enjoyment is such a key thing. And I'm 33 years old, and I might be optimistic today, and maybe when I'm 43 I'll be a lot more pessimistic, but today this is working for me. And I make my staff go home at 6 o'clock too. Everyone's got Blackberries, everyone's got laptops, everyone's got cell phones. Work isn't getting away from anybody, but people should be able to go home and hang out with their families or their girlfriends or their boyfriends and see a movie or watch The Sopranos or whatever. Because otherwise you end up wondering, like, why am I doing this? I forgot what it was about in the first place. I will tell you that every person I know who's been laid off from a major label, every time I talk to them a month, 2 months after they've been laid off and maybe they're just still being paid on their contract or whatever, and I say to them, how are you doing? And you know the first thing that all of them say? They're saying, man, it's kind of rough, but I'll tell you one thing, I sure do like music again. And I like to tell you, I like music every day because I don't hate what I'm doing. I might sound like a hippie, but I don't care. I am really happy that I made a career in music, and of course the joke is I don't know what else I'd be doing with myself. I mean, I probably would be a journalist if I wasn't making my living in music. The funny thing is, on a bad day when I think, man, what am I gonna do? This is crazy. I'm like a design freak, and I get my design juju met by making packages and hiring designers and working with my management and label clients, doing photos and videos and packages and designing my office or whatever. I love it. You see in my office, I've got like all kinds of crazy furniture and Frank Lloyd Wright posters and stuff. I think that the process of architecture and just design overall is very similar to how we manage bands and run record companies. It's how do I get the creative spark out of somebody else and make it something. I'm really glad that I've done this, and I think that one of the ways that I want to expand my business is to bring what I've learned in the entertainment business and actually maybe work with people who are in the visual arts or in the architectural arts and bring a little bit of the rock and roll management thing to those other areas. And I'm giving away a couple of my secrets by saying that, but I'm excited about this. Yeah, yes. Hey, I'm a kid who grew up in a basement in Milwaukee, on the south side of Milwaukee, and all I knew when I was 10 or 12 years old was that I need 2 AA batteries to play Van Halen 2 in my Walkman. Remember the foam headphones that never really sounded good, but it was pretty great? And I just have always wanted to be around music. I had no idea about management and all this shit. And over the years, as I figured it out, I feel really grateful that my passion and my sort of life force, if you will, led me to like having a whole office full of people working with me to help out all these great artists that I get to work with. It's kind of crazy. Like, I can't believe that I get to do this every day. And I make a pretty good living at it.